Let's cut right to the chase. Creative people are pretty nuts, and I know this because I'm one of them. If you're like me, you wonder, how do people get over the issues we face? That's what this show is all about. Think of each episode as a warm bath for the soul. We're all in this together, so let's do something good with the time we have left. This show is my love letter to the human condition. This, my friends, is Sentimental Illness. Hello. How are you guys doing today? Well, nice. Good. Sounds good. All right. So let me tell you a little story, and then we'll get to my guest. I started my first audiobook. I know. Hold for applause. I'm actually overwhelmed by it, and it's a good thing, but it's one of those things where you spend your life in a career, you do certain things. Like I'm a creative person, right? I started playing drums in 1970, which is a long time ago. And I had this vision that I was going to, be a professional drummer and do that my whole life. And, when I die, the world would mourn, that sort of thing, the John Lennon thing. That didn't quite come true. But, I had a great career. I loved every second of it. But there comes a moment where I had to hang up my spurs. Anyways, that creative gene still stuck inside of me. So being an insurance agent was not the dream job, the life I had hoped. So when I got out of that business in 2010, basically spent the last 14 years trying to figure things out. How do I get to be the person I am truly inside? And a couple of years ago, a friend of mine said, "Hey, Rob, you know what? You really should get into voiceover. I think that's the key for you." And not because I have some, great, deep, by a Chevrolet sort of voice, but I do have, I can do voices, man. It's all that stuff. Well, anyway, everybody says that, right? Everybody says, "Well, hey, I can do voices. What's so hard about that?" Or "I can record an audiobook. What's so hard?" Well, it isn't just being able to, sound like Daffy Duck, right? Or have a deep, basso profundo type voice. It is actually a million things. It's the main thing, God, guys, the hardest part about being an audiobook guy is the breath control. You have to find a way to hide breathing. Because if you've ever heard an audiobook, they don't go, started recording an audiobook for a company. You don't hear that, I am not the singer from Muse. You have to mask your breaths. And when you're talking 120,000 words, you're talking 12 finished hours. That's about 50 hours of actual recording time. That is an immensely overwhelming thing. I asked for it. I got it. But here's the cool part. And I want to say this before we get going. All my life, I've wanted to sort of be in a place where I felt like I fit and where I felt like I was wanted. And that's part of, I think, the creative culture. That's part of the weird, the insanity of being a creative person in general. Is this need to be loved, this need to be seen or heard. So I'm begging, "God, please let me have this opportunity." And then he goes, "Okay, boom." And I'm like, shit. Do I want this opportunity? So I got what I asked for, and I am thrilled about that. That's it. I don't have anything else to say. Okay, so my mouse doesn't work today, which really sucks. It's not a dead battery. It's just something stuck. So as I stare off into my computer, I want to bring my guest up here. Okay, so today my guest, Michael Bala. I think I said it right. Someone I admire for his talents as what I would call a musical phenom. He might be embarrassed by that, but I listen to his music, and of course it's extreme music to most people. To somebody like myself who's into metal and into progressive music stylings in general, something that's aggressive. The older I get, the more I like that sort of stuff. I like the chance taking that this kind of music exhibits. I like what it stands for, if that makes sense, musically. The challenge of this type of music is, what is the music saying as a musical product? And of course, what are the lyrics saying? What are we trying to get to here? And that's why I wanted to have Michael on the show. I admire what he's doing. I love his PR company very much. So, hey, it makes sense. We should get this guy on and we should talk to him. And you know what I mean? So, look, I think he's a serious talent. And I think his voice deserves to be amplified. In fact, I do want to say this before I bring him on. I've noticed that so many shows, look, I get it, but so many shows, their whole focus is, have I heard of the guy? Is he famous? Is he a celebrity? Is he an influencer? Well, with the amount of influencers with quotes around it that you find on Instagram and TikTok and all these other locations now, I really doubt that he would want to be lumped in with that anyway, but that's not what I'm looking for either. I'm not looking to hear what an 18-year-old wants or cares about. It doesn't mean that they're not important, but they don't speak to me. In the same token, as much as I'm fascinated by, say, Tom Cruise isn't going to come on my podcast. I have nothing to offer him. So there's that fine line. I want to have great people on. I want to elevate the music and the talent and the creativity and the mindset of certain individuals that I think are deserving of such a place. And it's not because I'm so cool. It's because they're so cool. So I'm going to bring Michael on. We'll just talk about it. But this guy, I will say this guy, I'm not going to compare him to Stravinsky, okay? That would be insanity. I'm not going to compare him to Bach or Beethoven or Wagner. But I truly believe that if those composers existed today, they would be in the heavy music realm. They just would be, man. All that symphonic metal you're hearing out there, the progressive death metal, all that stuff, you'd be seeing them there. And maybe it's an overreach, but maybe Michael's got a thing that we should go at. So let's bring him on. All right. I'm going to bring him onto the stage, and if I could get my mouse, there it is. Hey, Michael.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Did I blow enough smoke up your tailpipe this morning?
The only person who speaks of me as kindly is my mother.
Well, we're on the right track. Oh, man. I will tell you, John Asher Media, had recommended you, and I love what John stands for. You know what I mean? I love the type of music he represents. I love the guy as a guy. I love the guy as a professional. And so I take a listen to this. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is really, one, it's aggressive. And two, it's actually different. I notice, without blowing too much smoke, that there is a different voice in there. You know, that you can take this style of music in general and sort of cross-contaminate it with a lot of other bands that are of a similar ilk, but you do stand out, and I wanted to make sure you heard that right off the top. So,
well, thank you.
You betcha. And it is Michael Bala, yes?
Yes, long L, like saying lamb.
Okay. Well, anyway, you were going to say, and I stepped right on top of your chicken there.
Well, the goal with what we're doing was always to take sort of my favorite musical priorities and toss them together all in a salad bowl. And I really love glam metal from the 80s.
Nice.
The guitar playing was always over the top, and they had such a rock and roll attitude about things that can get lost with a little bit more of the modern rock or even a little bit more of the modern metal stuff. But I also really love the speed and aggression of old school death metal.
Right on.
And the thing is, music is a universal language. Meshuggah has a lot more in common with Ariana Grande than people realize.
Yes.
So there's no reason why we can't take these things and put them together. And, maybe not every experiment works all that well, but, the point is, as you're trying to strike that balance between what is an intellectual exercise in writing music and what's a song people are actually going to be interested in listening to.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't hear the glam thing in there, but now that you mention it, it is interesting that is, an observance, meaning I got to think about how I want to phrase this, but when you grow up, obviously one of the big questions in this business is what influenced you, like what combs your hair at night, you know what I mean? And that can be 10 billion things. I mean, you could be influenced by the guy you just passed on the freeway. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but to have glam be this thing that's sort of hidden in the mix, it's like it's like a great cake. There's a little vanilla in there. You know what I mean? And that vanilla changes the flavor significantly.
Absolutely. I'd say one of the biggest influences for us, if I had to put a name to it, Racer X, especially the second Heat album with Paul Gilbert, Bruce Bollier.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul Gilbert, if I had to pick one guitar player, Paul Gilbert's my favorite. And what he did in that band, where the songs are they're just good rock tunes with extreme guitar playing. That's what I want to do, just with death metal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, wow. I haven't heard the Racer X, man, I haven't heard anybody talk about Racer X in so long. They are definitely one of the underrated, mid 80s. In a sense, I hate the term speed metal. I hate all those, it's like the guy who sits on the outside who basically poo-poos everything, who says like, oh, that's satanic. Right? It doesn't give any credence to the development of that artistic skill. The fact that it's not just Paul playing incredibly fast or playing a string of notes that don't make sense. No, it's actually very, very well thought out and highly rehearsed, and it absolutely fits in the music, and it pushes the genre forward as well. Like, it's such an aggressively new thing at the time. Like, people always talk about Yngwie, but they don't talk about Paul. I don't know why that is.
I don't either. I mean, Paul is he's that perfect combination of incredible technique and a lot of musical knowledge, but also he's got that street approach too, that I've listened to 10,000 records and I know how to get the sounds I want all the time. And so he has that fire and that passion when he plays too, that a lot of players, especially players with a high graded technique, I think they can kind of lose after a while. Yeah. But those 80s dudes, especially Paul, in my opinion, of course, they've got that perfect combination of great technique and just fun factor, passion, fire, danger, incredible guitar playing.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, Paul was the return to forever. Racer X was the return to forever of how am I saying this? I can't even think straight this morning. The return to forever of rock or heavy rock or hard. I don't want to call Racer X metal. I mean, I guess they are. I've always thought of them as just a hard rock that goes really fast.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Because metal's more of an attitude, and I never felt the metal attitude from Racer X.
They were too busy having fun.
Yeah,
busy just writing fun tunes.
Yeah. They're Mr. Big, but with speed.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And Mr. Big's still super fun too.
Of course. Yeah. But it's that, right? It's the mid 80s, the hair metal band, but serious chops. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just walking in circles right now.
Another great band of that era that people make fun of all the time. And I'm not afraid to say this. I'm a big Winger fan. Red Beach, incredible guitar player.
Yeah.
The band as a whole, just amazing chops, great songwriting. And they had that perfect sweet spot of the musicians in the crowd could hear all the cool stuff going on, but the songs were still catchy enough and accessible enough to where the average person who maybe wasn't as schooled in music could still enjoy it. Right. Then of course, they get on Beavis and Butthead. What was it? Stuart's character who always had the winger.
Right. The outcast. And it makes sense. I mean, they did sort of make their own bed when it came to songs like 17, right? Because you look, they were doing what you're supposed to do. They were writing fun, catchy music that was kind of tacky. And that was part of that generation. It's the way things were. It's actually what we look back at fondly. Like,
Yeah.
I get it. 17 on the top is kind of creepy. I mean, I should say kind of. It's super creepy. But, we have to also take it with a grain of salt. One, product of the time, and two, it's fucking awesome. It's a great song. And
Yes,
that middle break, oh my God, what a groove.
So groovy. I just watched an interview with Reb Beach, actually. I think the interview was conducted at the Arcada Theater over in St. Charles, Illinois. But he was talking about on the first two Winger records, there was a lot of influence from the studio to be poppy and be accessible. And, I don't know how many of those decisions they made were necessarily all their own. But regardless, the albums are the albums we got, and they're friggin' awesome.
Yeah. Look, a producer's pretty much going to tell you what to do. I mean, it's the way it is, and you got to play ball. I was in a situation in 99 that our band didn't play ball with the producer, and we lost our deal because of it. So I know that you do, that idea of selling your soul absolutely exists. Not necessarily literally, but certainly figuratively. As a creative person, you have to be willing to tread down roads that are currently accessible to the mainstream. It's called the music business, not the I don't know, whatever else it would be. It's the music business. You gotta make somebody else money, and then you'll make money. That's the way it is.
Art and business have always had a relationship that are, basically diametrically opposed to one another, but they also can't exist without each other. Right. So there's always going to be that unfortunate thought in the back of your head: is what I'm doing, is this going to make money? Are people going to like this? Are people going to be upset by this? And it's a tough thing to navigate. It really is. And thankfully, I'm not in the position where I've got tens of thousands of dollars or possibly more riding on the line. I'm doing a lot of this stuff myself.
Right.
But I can imagine how when you are not even at the top, but when you're just higher on that totem pole and people are trying to pressure you into making decisions, I can understand how difficult of a position that must really be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Certainly production teams, when they look at a band like Winger, you're going to say, okay, I recognize a lot of marketability here. The band, Over the Top, generally was an attractive band. I'm not necessarily Rod Morgenstein's number one crush, but I would say that the band, they were a good looking group of guys. You've got that. That's the obvious, right? They were very MTV friendly. You had Kip's style as a stage man, as a connoisseur of the front man, the mythology of that. He represented the modern cross between the hair metal of the time and the late 70s, a little bit of the David Lee Roth thing. He had that. They had the grooves. You had Reb's insane chops. You had Rod's insane chops. You had Kip's insane chops. I mean, the man is a phenomenal bass player. You had the pedigree coming from the Alice Cooper years. You had so much going on. You had the former Dixie Dregs drummer, right? You had everything in your hand. So it makes sense that they were going to be leveraged to the hilt, and they were for, that one tiny sort of comet exploding into the atmosphere moment. What were they around for? Basically 2 records, but
I think the original one was Winger, In the Heart of the Young, then Pull, and then they broke up in, I want to say, 94.
Right.
So they broke up probably before I was even born.
Right. Wow. Now you're making me feel old. It's funny because when they came out, when 17 came out, I was 21 or 22. That was 88, I think, 88, I'm pretty sure. So I was 21. And that was a hugely influential song to me. I actually find that interesting that you were born post-Winger breakup and you find them intriguing.
Oh man,
how does that happen, man?
growing up, my mom loved the blues and country music.
Okay.
So that was always on in the house. And my dad liked a lot of hard rock and metal.
Okay.
And so I would come home from school and I would put on rock bands that my friends were listening to. And this was maybe sixth grade. So I was 12 or 13. And I'd bring home stuff like Breaking Benjamin or 3 Days Grace. And I'd put on a record and my dad would go, "What is this?" I said, "Oh, this is rock music, Dad." And my dad would say, "This isn't rock music. This is rock music." And he'd put on Aerosmith.
Right.
Or Ted Nugent or Bad Company.
Right on.
And
It's a good dad.
Yeah, oh, totally. my dad's the very kooky guy with a very broad taste in music.
Yeah.
And I got this idea that to find music I'm interested in, I don't look forwards, I look backwards.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why I'm into all the glam dudes, a lot of the 70s classic rock bands, a lot of really great blues players. The modern stuff, there are bands I like. There are musicians I like, but it just, it doesn't interest me as much. And I felt more like myself as a musician when I stopped trying to be current, or when I stopped trying to practice the things that other guitar players were practicing or learn the songs that they were learning. I just didn't have nearly as much of an interest.
Right. Well, if I may, knowing what you play for music, I mean, we haven't even talked about the band. We'll get there shortly, but knowing what you do musically in the sense of your own abilities, your chops, the way you write a song, it makes sense to me that you would say, well, okay, if this kind of music, in a sense, is so nichey, because it is. I mean, you play a niche type of music, very much so. It's not radio friendly. We recognize that. It's crowd friendly, but to a very specific type of crowd. And I think, you're already obviously finding your way, so that's not an issue. You wouldn't be here if you weren't doing something, not because I'm so cool, but because you are actively out pursuing, people noticing what you achieve. But I find it interesting that what you're basically telling me is, look, I grew up on this sort of thing back here, and I don't necessarily enjoy what I'm currently hearing. So I'm going to do exactly what I want. And two, I really like the attitude and the behavior and the joy of the way music used to be. And I'm going to find a way to mix that up into a stew. Is that right?
That's spot on. Completely.
Right on. Okay. So then I got to say something, and I say this, I've been saying this a lot lately, but I'm going to say it again to you. So do you know who the Hudson brothers are? Do you have any idea? The Hudson brothers, as in, Kate Hudson's dad used to be married to Goldie Hawn, and that's Bill Hudson. And he's one of these three brothers who in the early to mid 70s were supposedly going to be the next big thing. They never quite broke. Are you familiar with them?
I've heard of that in a distant sense, because wasn't Kurt Russell married to Goldie Hawn for a while?
He's still with her. He's not married to her, but I don't think they've ever been married, I should say. But they've been together for like 35, 38 years, something like that. I've heard of them because I like Kurt Russell, put it that way. Okay. Well, in the early 70s, they actually somehow ended up in two places. They ended up on American Bandstand, which, do you know anything about that? Because
I do. My dad showed me American Bandstand.
Okay, so I grew up on American Bandstand. For listeners who don't know, American Bandstand was a Saturday morning show featuring people dancing to current pop hits of the day. They actually had the Hudson brothers on there, and I'm not sure who got behind the Hudson brothers to prop them up like they did, but they ended up with a Saturday morning variety show. And this is the era of the Sid and Marty Krofft. This is the Sigmund and the Sea Monsters and the Love Bug and that goofy Saturday morning half animated, half puppet show cartoon variety shows. They were very strange, and they were commonplace in the early 70s. I blame LSD for most of this. But the Hudson brothers were this anomaly that they were a cross between a 1920s vaudeville act and Elton John. And I'm not joking. They, as musicians, as singers, as songwriters, were extraordinary. But for some reason, because they were tied to that stupid variety show, and if you watch it online, if you go onto YouTube and type Hudson Brothers Razzle Dazzle, you will be overwhelmed by the silliness and stupidity. It's the worst kind of thing ever. It's the worst ever. So I really think the team behind them ultimately destroyed them. But if you can find a 1975 record called Ba-Fa, B-A-F-A, and it's available on YouTube, you will hear some of the best early mid-70s pop you've ever heard. And it's, I mean, like every one of those songs sounds like Elton John wrote it and performed it. They're just fantastic mid-70s pop nuggets. Perfect stuff. And I tell everybody lately, I don't know why I'm on a kick with the Hudson Brothers again, but man, if you want to hear something that will, comb your hair back, that's a great band to check out. So
Very
for what
cool.
it's worth.
Very cool.
I don't know why I'm going down this road, man. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm always happy to check out something new. So I don't actually have any streaming services or anything like that. I buy vinyl and CDs.
Good for you.
And that's still how I consume music. So I'm more than happy to go through the Chicago record stores, combing through all the vinyl to find something like that.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very fun weekend project.
Yeah. Somebody will have it somewhere. I do have the vinyl of that. Actually, I have 2 copies of it. I love it so much. It's my favorite record of all time. I have a very well worn, very well played and loved version of it. The one I got in 1975 at Christmas. And then I have an unopened copy that is, it's perfect vinyl. And this is before they started, reprocessing albums in the modern vinyl, where it's a really thick record and really, really well made. So it probably sounds like crap, but hey, it's great.
I've got an original in the packaging, Iron Maiden Peace of Mind vinyl.
Oh yeah. Great record.
And it was surprisingly cheap for the fact that it's never been opened. It was $120. And
Yeah.
Iron Maiden's favorite band of all time. I've got tickets to see them on this next tour, 3 different cities. It's going to be like my 11th, 12th, and 13th time for Maiden. So I saw that at Reckless Records in Chicago. I was like, yeah, that's coming home with me. And it's displayed proudly in the dining room.
Right. And I bet you want to open it up and hear it, but you can't.
I do. I have an open copy for that.
Yeah. There you go. Good for you. Well, look, we've got you here. We've got you here to talk about the band. We've got you here to talk about the direction of the band, where you're going. Necronomicon ex Mortis. Yes?
Absolutely.
So that basically translates to Book of the Dead.
Book of the Dead, of the Dead, or something like that.
Right. Of the Dead. Right. Because Necronomicon by itself is actually the Book of the Dead, right?
It's funny we're doing this because it's actually H.P. Lovecraft's birthday today.
Oh, see, now you got to something I was going to jump on, so that's cool. I have this thing I try to do during the show where I talk about some trivial things just to get the conversation started, but we're already talking, so. But yes, H.P. Lovecraft, all day.
Yes, very much. Now, okay, I am a big Lovecraft fan. There are songs we have that directly reference stories he's written or characters he's created. But the band name actually comes from Evil Dead, the first movie from 1981.
Yep.
Favorite movie of all time. Always will be, always has been.
It's a it's a great movie. I actually like Army of Darkness a little bit more, but I think it's because the comedic element is so ramped up, and there's a moment where, gosh, I can't even quote it, but where he's talking to everybody in the village, and he's like, "This here's my boomstick.
This is my boomstick," and he holds it up high in the crowd.
Yeah. You can get this at S Mart. S Mart.
Shop smart. Shop S smart. Yeah.
It's so stupid, but I love that movie, not because it's infinitely quotable, but because I saw it at the right time in my life. I was in my late 20s, and it just resonated with me as a madcap comedy. It's definitely not gory. It's just silly, but I like it because it's silly.
I love how wacky Evil Dead is, because the first one's not funny, but it's still really over the top. The second one's very scary and very funny, and then the third one's just ridiculousness for the sake of being ridiculous.
Yes.
So, I mean, you get three very, very different tones throughout all of them, and again, Evil Dead, favorite franchise. I love all of them. I loved Evil Dead 2013. I loved Evil Dead Rise. I loved Ash versus Evil Dead. I'm trying to collect the comics that came out 30 years ago. They're not exactly the easiest to track down, but they do have one. I think it's called Ash versus Reanimator. That's Herbert West from the Reanimator franchise against Ash Williams, or maybe joining up with him or something like that. I've seen a few issues, but I haven't had the chance to purchase them yet.
Wow. Well, is it the same? It's okay. Yeah. I mean, Herbert West, that character is something else. Oh my gosh. Well, so I guess what I want to know is this, because I know I'm being very tangential this morning. I almost feel like I'm high. I'm not really sure why, because I'm definitely not high. What drew you in this direction? Like you mentioned your dad being, hey kid, listen to this. I got Ted Nugent over here. I got Aerosmith over there. You know what I mean? Like you said, Bad Company. I get that you want to hear that classic. You have in your head that classic blues rock / metal, a little bit of aggression, a little bit of sexy. How does that translate into a love for gory, violent, weird, hilarious combination of imagery? How does that happen to a kid?
Well, okay, what got my attention with music was Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien. I heard that when I was very young in the car, and according to my dad, I just stopped dead in my tracks every time that would come on the radio.
Wow.
So my parents eventually bought me a guitar, and I didn't take to it right away until my dad started showing me a bunch of classic rock bands. And from then, it went to classic rock to kind of that 80s hair metal thing, from 80s hair metal to thrash metal, by way of a band called Creator from Germany.
Yes, with a K.
Yes, with a K. And then from Creator, I found Opeth and Symphony X and Dream Theater.
Oh,
and then the floodgates opened, and I just wanted metal all the time. Yeah, and that was my world for a really long time, until I got a little bit frustrated with some of the guitar playing on the more modern death metal records. It didn't have the crazy wild vibrato that I wanted to hear, or it didn't have the explosive nature that like the glam metal guys did. When you put on an Yngwie record, you don't know what's going to happen. He's just going to go for it, and that's the fun. That's the excitement. A lot of the music that I was listening to felt a little overly composed. There wasn't that element of danger in there, so I wanted to go back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
As for the gory imagery, that also comes from my dad. he loves Halloween. That's just what it was. He loves Halloween. So every year we would pile in the car and we'd drive to all the stores that had Halloween decorations. We'd look at everything. We'd spend ungodly amounts of money on Halloween decorations, and we'd lie to my mother about how much we actually spent. And it was something that, when I think back, I just think of fond memories with my dad. Oddly enough, he's not much of a horror movie guy. I could never figure that one out, but I got him into a lot of that stuff because we were doing all the Halloween stuff every year, and I remember seeing Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, on AMC Fear Friday. And it terrified me. I was way too young to be watching that movie, but I was absolutely terrified, especially that opening scene where the lightning strikes and you can see his mask lit up by the flash of light. It's, oh my God, I was horrified. But I loved it.
Yeah.
I went from Halloween 4 immediately into Halloween 5. I sat there and watched it just, kind of from behind the couch. And ever since then, I've just had this love of all things Halloween, all things autumn. Is my favorite time of year. And I figured, well, I, as a person, I don't have, I'm not the most socially aware person in the world. And I certainly don't write songs about things that are necessarily relevant, but I like to write songs about monsters, monster movies and zany horror movies, and because that stuff is fun. It gives me a sense of activation, as my therapist would say.
Yeah, yeah. That's what Black Sabbath did. They were accused of the wrong things. Nobody really knew what Black Sabbath was about, and of course, this is pre-social media by 35 years, right? So nobody really knew. It was all hearsay. What was the band saying? What were they talking about? What did they mean? How did they live? Did they believe this? What was it? Was it a character? You find out later that Ozzy's like, he's this goofy British kid who just liked the idea of horror movies. Now, granted, he made some questionable choices in his life, biting animals in general, lots of drug use, fecal matter on the walls of hotels. He's done some things. But when you get down to it, yes, it was just kids playing with imagery. It wasn't, direct devil worship. It wasn't mayhem or or Venom or any of some of the scarier black metal bands, which even then are, just exaggerated. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I agree with you 1,000% that that's the greatest stuff. And there is a weird thing that happens to kids. So it makes sense. And that thing is horror. We're told we're not supposed to watch scary or gory movies for a lot of reasons. One, we're banned because of rating restrictions. We certainly can't. When I was growing up, I couldn't go to an R-rated movie. They checked ID. You couldn't get into the theater. It didn't matter if you wanted to. It didn't matter even if you went with parents. They would actually turn your parents away and say, hey, this movie's really not appropriate for kids. There was a lot of gatekeeping back then. But because of that, all we wanted to see was horror. And, I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, where the first real heavy, I wouldn't even call it the Renaissance, the first really explosive era of cinema that included Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Friday the 13th movies, the Nightmare Before Elm Street movies, the Halloween movies. It was gore. All the Italian classics like Zombie and, not Day of the Dead. What's it? There was this one. No, that was 85, I think. That was the slash comedy, right? Or no, that was Return of the Living Dead.
That was July 3rd, 1985. Is the
I saw that in the theater, dude.
That's an awesome movie.
It's an awesome movie. Awesome. Absolutely hilarious. But no, there's a movie, Gates of Hell. That's what it is. It has the single... To me, it's worse than the zombie eye poke. It has a scene where this demonic character just magically appears. It's very Italian. It's hilarious. Magically appears and similar to The Ring. In The Ring, you see this little child and she terrifies you and you die, right? In Gates of Hell, it's this old priest who hung himself. Who now his spirit, his apparition is showing up at various places around the world. And when he shows up, you're hypnotized and you invert.
Oh my goodness.
It's absolutely disgusting. And there's a scene where a woman's stomach comes out of her mouth. She vomits up her insides. And they show it. It lasts like 45 seconds. It's just this long flow of goo coming out of her mouth. And then when it gets to the stomach, her mouth like widens to get it out. Like it's absolutely furiously gross. And all I wanted, because I was reading Fangoria. all I wanted was to go see this movie. I just had to see it. And we went with all of our friends, all my high school friends, and my cousin who got us into the theater. And I think I was 16, but my cousin was 20, and we went in there and all just sat there and gagged and laughed continuously. And I think that's what it was. It was a communal experience about seeing something you weren't supposed to see and all surviving it together, like riding a super scary roller coaster. Okay.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what happens to most kids. I have a 13-year-old daughter who wants that right now. All she wants to do is watch scary, anime, for example. And my wife was pushing back on this really hard the other day. And I thought, I agree that violent imagery doesn't necessarily need to be seen by anyone, let alone children. But I'm not a prude, but I've also come to the place that I realize that, well, yeah, but we've all walked through this, and I feel like keeping people away from that, even if it's not technically entertaining, it's a human curiosity to wonder what that is. Why does that happen? And I think that's why I'm interested in talking to you today, because your music is basically those movies on musical steroids.
Yeah, yeah. The rest of the band refers to what we do as Scooby-Doo death metal.
That's great.
Yeah, right, kind of that monster of the week sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay, so I apologize for talking so much. I know I feel like I just hung forever on that story, but let me get to the music. Let me get to you specifically. When it comes to writing material for yourself or for this band, are you the only songwriter in the band, or are you, in a sense, because I know you're the main guy, so to speak, but is the vision of the band, is that you, or is that a group effort?
Oh, geez. So I say this just because it is largely the truth. I'm not trying to give myself any undeserved credit. It
okay.
is largely me.
Okay.
What happened was I went to Berklee. I did the whole proper music school thing, and I lived in Boston for many years, and I was kind of upset that there were a lot of bands playing, but the metal bands didn't really sound like the metal band I would want. So I started writing songs. I moved from Boston to Chicago briefly, and then from Chicago to LA. In LA, I played with a few people, started a band that was going pretty okay for a while. And I had this wealth of songs built up.
Right.
Unfortunately, the band I was in broke down for a number of reasons. COVID certainly didn't help. And, not all the members were on the same page. I ended up moving back to Chicago. And with this wealth of songs, I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to stop looking for band members and just do it myself.
Right.
And I'll get some people to help me. They're going to be some of my best friends from Berklee. And that's exactly what I did. All of the people in my band are guys I was in class with. Right. And I just called them and said, hey, do you want to play on my super cool horror death metal releases? And they'd say, why would we do that?
Right.
Because you get to go to LA and I'll pay for it. And they said, okay. And that's how it started, basically. I do write most of the music. Our bass player, Yusuf, has expressed interest in doing more of his own bass lines. Okay, great. So here's the song. Here's the guitar part. Write a bass line you believe is appropriate. And the other guitar player, Manuel and I are such opposites as players. He is all modern, loves modern everything. I'm very much a student of the old school kind of ways. And Manuel is really great at creating atmosphere. So there are a lot of parts in the songs where I have a riff or a melody or something like that. And he says, okay, so we can do that, but I'm going to add a keyboard part really low in the background. Most people probably aren't going to notice it, but you'll feel a difference. He's amazing at stuff like that.
Yeah.
And on our next few releases, because we tracked everything far in advance because it can be a little difficult getting people in the same room, on our next few releases, there's a lot of these more atmospheric moments within the songs and small atmospheric pieces themselves. And Manuel had a huge hand in creating those. And I truly could not be more appreciative of him for doing that, because I'm not good with subtlety.
Right. Oh, bless you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I actually want to come back to the Berklee thing. I didn't go to Berklee. I'm not saying I should have, in the sense of like I'm so amazing. I think I wanted to, but I ended up skipping that and going straight into the military, doing that instead, which was a weird choice. But then I ended up in the Navy band, which of course you have to audition for, and then you discover everybody's from Berklee. So which is very strange, because military music, you would think that wouldn't necessarily have much requirement, but the guys in the Navy were very much top drawer musicians. But that drew me towards the sort of the mythology of Berklee. And again, I've never been to the school. I actually don't know a lot of musicians from the school, but the one thing I know, and of course most of my audience knows, is Berklee's a place where the great guys go, where the best guys go. And that also explains why I like the music, because I recognize the technical ability, not just the technical ability, but I hear the skill in you and the other guys playing. So was that a requirement? I mean, yes, you knew these guys and you brought them in because it made sense. These are guys I know they're great players, they'll do a great job, etc. But is that a driving force for you, that you have to, that there can't be any sort of sludginess to the music, that it has to have almost a classical operatic feel to it, which requires a high level of musicianship? That's a loaded question.
It is, yeah. It's a sweet spot sort of thing, because we don't want the music to sound so precise that a computer made it.
Right.
But we also don't want it to sound so sloppy that it sounds like it was recorded in a garage with a bunch of people who only could halfway play their instrument. Right. So it's a really, you need to be skilled enough to play things metronomically precise, but also musical enough to know when to let it breathe.
Right. Don't want to remove it. You don't want it to be soulless.
Exactly. Because a lot of those old metal records, I mean, you put on a Slayer record, that tempo's going to do this throughout the song. And that's not a bad thing. That's what gives it life.
Right.
So we wanted that as much as possible in the music. So there was a certain requirement in terms of technicality, but I think when it comes to technique overall, once you demonstrate that you can actually play your instrument properly, I think technique stops mattering. You know, it doesn't really matter to me if someone can play at 285 BPM.
Right.
If they can't
Infinite Annihilator.
Technique is great, and it's something that is necessary, especially when you're playing in a band that is writing music that is not easy to play. It's very much an endurance test. But it wasn't something that I specifically needed. I wasn't giving them exact tempos saying, oh, you must play this at 260, otherwise you're out and I'll never speak to you again. It wasn't anything like that.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, most people they still don't know that music is heavily quantized, that nowadays modern music is really two things. It's precise to an annoyance, to me at least. It's so loaded with precision. Tones are replaced, reamping guitars, changing the tones, the tonalities for drums, just tone replacement, changing everything so it sounds like a precise robot. It removes all of the soul, all of the bounce of a recording. And yet that is what the industry expects of its artists. I was watching a reaction show the other day, and they were talking about, I want to say they were talking about September by Earth, Wind & Fire. And of course, to me, the idea of not having ever heard that song before, like this is your first time in 2024 to hear September by Earth, Wind and Fire, makes me sick to my stomach. but they were listening to it, and it was two drummers. I don't remember where this was. I'll have to find it. And all they could say is, oh, I hear the subtleties in the rhythmic changes, like the song speeds up or slows down here. And I thought it was cool that they noticed it. But I would also say that, yeah, but nobody who cares noticed it. and on top of that, do you know why it was sped up? Because of the melodic changes. I don't know if you know this, Michael, but the song was similar to the Beatles' A Day in a Life, was recorded across different days with different parts of the band, and the horns, when they recorded them, there was something to do with the tape speed had been set incorrectly. So instead of at the time, instead of like running at 24, whatever it would be called in music, because it's frames per second in video, but running at that rate, it was off slightly, like 25.68 or something like that. And so they had to change the way the SMPTE codes locked to make it work. And so it ended up that one half of the song, or one part of the song, is actually like 35 cents sharp or something crazy. And so the song is actually impossible to play note for note because it's out of tune. So like people with a perfect pitch go like, the whole time when they listen to it, because it's not in tune and it's in between notes, which I'd love.
It's insane how stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
And no, I didn't know that, but I mean, thinking back, it's like, that's actually kind of hilarious because that song was a mega hit. And the general public, they're never going to notice something like that.
Nope.
It's just, one of the biggest songs of all time. It's out of tune.
Yeah, they're like, man, it needs to be quantized. You can hear the drum. I'm like, oh my God. Well, I mean, I think it's actually kind of cool to have your ears tuned so well that you notice that, because I'm a drummer, man. I've been playing 50 plus years. And even though I could hear fluctuation in beats, not like say 120 BPM to 118 BPM. Are you kidding me? I'm not noticing that. Nobody's noticing that. You're full of shit if you say you're noticing that. You're not noticing that. Oh God, I'm blabbing so much. I'm sorry. This is
you're good, man. You're good.
Poor guy. The worst interview you've ever been a part of.
No, this is actually it's one of the most calming and relaxing I've ever been a part of. Truthfully.
Well, that's nice, man. Okay. Well, when it comes to music, you've told me what the band means to you in the sense of what you're trying to achieve as a musician, as a songwriter. And even lyrically, you're playing in that realm of the horror. But if I ask you personally, like, what does Michael want for his life, his musical life? What is it you're trying to achieve with this band? What are you trying to say?
I think for an artist, there's a certain amount of your personality that you're willing to put into the music. And for me, Necronomicon X Mortis is essentially all of my musical priorities in one area. And I'm able to externalize the music and talk about it as a way of talking about myself, because I'm very uncomfortable with talking about myself just person to person. So my goal with the music is I want to push it as far as I possibly can. Our goal right now is to keep pushing the social media, which is going well, because I would like to be on a label. And then when we're on a label, I'd like to do a couple of tours per year. I've got a fairly large amount of songs planned to release. I mean, I love doing what I do so much that is the only thing I think about. And when I'm doing it, whether that's writing a song for the band or practicing guitar, I'm in this headspace where the world finally makes sense. I don't have to question what's going on. I know I'm going to practice alternate picking for exactly 1 hour. I will do these exercises for 5 minutes each. If I do them for 5 minutes each, I can do 12 of them. And I will go from this BPM to this BPM. It's the most it's organized so beautifully that I don't have to question what's going on. I just have to sit there and play and hit the clicks. And I feel the same when I'm writing a song. It's just, this is where the world makes sense. And it's all I want to do. And I want to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and get as close to I possibly can as making the band a full-time career. I mean, right now I teach to pay my rent. I teach guitar, which is not a bad gig. I actually enjoy it for a number of reasons. The money is good, and it's nice to help people learn. It's nice to be able to get excited about music with people.
Yeah, paying it forward.
Absolutely. But I want to push the band as far as I possibly can, and I have no intention of stopping or slowing down. In fact, I'm desperately trying to figure out how I can release 2 more things before the end of the year instead of just 1.
Everybody's telling you to slow down, man. Slow down.
Well, my wallet is telling me to slow down because this stuff gets expensive quickly. But I don't care. I'll sink everything I have into it just because it's the greatest thing I've ever done, and it's the greatest thing I will ever do. And that's not coming from a point of arrogance or grandiosity. It's just coming from, this is where I feel like me. This is where I feel like I can communicate with the rest of the world effectively, and I can also showcase the things that I really love. And if that means, writing a song about Evil Dead for the 10th time or The Thing or Reanimator or something like this, and, talking about how cool Jeffrey Combs was, and I'm going to do it.
Then so be it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, okay, so you live in the perfect time for what you do. You do recognize that, right?
It can be hard for me to recognize that, but yes, I do. I'm a little bit of a technophobe. I'm not the best with computers, and I am not the best with keeping up with my own social media because, again, I'm just kind of an old school dude. I'd rather watch a movie on VHS with all the computers and technology past 1996 in the other room.
Yeah.
So I do live in the best time for what I'm currently doing. I can forget that and get a little old man cranky sometimes, but being an independent artist now, it's terrible for a number of reasons, but it's also wonderful for a number of reasons. And when you have equal reasons it's great for why equal reasons it's not great, you need to just focus on the good.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you focus on the things that are bad, if you focus on the things that are working against you, you're never going to go anywhere, and you're just going to come off as a really out of touch, angry person. And I've been that guy, and I've been in that headspace. It's not a good place to be, and I'm refusing to go back. So I focus as much as possible on what I can control and the good things about today. I still need to learn more about computers. There's no way around that. I'm getting there slowly.
Yeah. Here's what I want to say about you, and I'm not saying we have to end, but here's what I want to say about you, and I think that it's very true. You sound so well put together, and to me it seems as though your father not only had great influence on you musically, but emotionally, spiritually, practically. It seems to me that your dad might be your best friend. Is that the case?
After this interview, I'm actually going to go pick him up. We're going to go get some burgers, go hang out. He said he wants to go to Aldi. So yeah. My dad's, he's actually kind of a meme among my band and my friend group because he's just such a weird dude. And I take pictures of him when he falls asleep in a chair and then send them to my friends.
He's a spirit animal of the band.
He really is. We all...
No, I mean,
we
that's
all know
great.
Paul real well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's funny because typically I have people on the show who, there's a reason it's called sentimental illness, right? One, I'm the host and I'm a I'm a mess. You know what I mean? I get my catharsis. I get my weekly dose of counseling by actually talking to you. You make my life better. It's true, Michael. It's absolutely true. And meeting you today has done just that. You've raised my spirits. You've reminded me that there's hope and that there's good. And don't get me wrong. I'm not coming to the show like, having a bad day. Sometimes I am, but for the most part, I want to be present, I want to be available, and I want to be in a good place. But I've always found that the vast majority of the audience and the guests are pretty busted up. And I love how hopeful and inspired you are. And I love that you take this seriously, but that it's kind of goofy.
You gotta approach this stuff with a sense of self-awareness, because the thing is, when you're playing metal especially, you're a bunch of big hairy dudes going into a pit of big hairy dudes beating the hell out of each other. Like, there's something about this that's not only ridiculous but also funny. And so taking it seriously to the point of like a blood vessel popping, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, we listen to music because it feels good, or at least makes us feel better. So there's no point in getting all down and dour about it. Just, have fun, man. Do your thing.
Right. So then do you like Devin Townsend as an example? Are you a Devin Townsend fan?
I am a Devin Townsend fan, and I met him at NAMM in 2020, and he was just the nicest dude. He was so cool.
Yeah. I'm not saying you sound like, because you don't, but what I do like about you, and I think what I recognize, and honestly, now that I've met you, I know this to be true, is that you don't necessarily take it too seriously. You certainly take it seriously as a musician and as a creative, but that tongue is planted very firmly in your cheek. And I think for fans of Devin's type of music, of what he's saying or not saying maybe in his material, especially his older material, the Strapping Young Lad stuff, reminds me a lot of what you're doing, which is there's a goofiness hidden inside of the dark, scary tones, so to speak. So I think it's a perfect companion piece for you. You should definitely tour with that guy if you can someday.
I was such a huge Strapping Young Lad fan. Little difficult to say, in high school. I've got all their records, and I loved how they had songs that were legitimately emotional and very poignant contemplations on life, society, and then they'd come out with a song called Satan's Ice Cream Truck. It's
right.
I mean, I loved that, because for better or for worse, whether you were a fan of that thing or not, you can't deny that that's just Devin's personality coming out in the weirdest way possible. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's stupid, but it's all him. Yeah. And we've got a song like that coming up on our next release. I don't want to give too much away, but it's very much tongue firmly planted in cheek about how great the Halloween season is. It's called Trick or Treat.
There you go.
We're giving it to the promoters, hopefully in the next few days. We're just waiting on a couple video projects to be finished up first. But it's very much that campy, over-the-top, gore, funny thing. I wrote that song while watching Terrifier 2.
I haven't seen that. I can't watch those, dude. I can't watch those. Too much. It's too much.
It's over the top. And there's one scene in particular that inspired this song that is insanely over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's for anyone who's seen the movie, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's the standout kill, maybe.
Is it the down the middle one, the crotch?
No, that's the first one.
Okay, so I just, dude, even the idea, I haven't seen it. I can't even give it a chance. Like, it's just too visceral. It's too immediate. It's right in your face, and it's all the worst things. I can't. Oh my God. No, just even thinking about it makes me sick to my stomach.
Oh yeah. Well, it's effective. We'll leave it at that. It's effective.
Oh, geez. Oh my God. I think you do have to have, I mean, to I don't want to call it even enjoy, but I think you do enjoy Terrifier, right? You like it.
I love those movies.
So how do you think you adjusted? Because, I mean, really, I think that's the whole point of this chat today. You got a great dad. You play incredible music. You're super, super talented, and you're a really nice guy.
Oh, thank you, dude.
Yeah. How do you think you adjusted to the place that you can watch something like that? Or you can watch a horror movie, you can see something incredibly aggressive and not let it harm you? I mean, do you think maybe it is you just don't mind?
Just the opposite, actually. I think that people carry around so much frustration with them. And they have a lot of dark thoughts that they do not ever admit to. They don't. They'll have one. Intrusive thoughts, I think the younger generation is currently calling them. They'll have one. They won't acknowledge it. They push it away. And when you do that, you bury it, and that's not healthy.
No.
I think that if you acknowledge them for what they are, and realize, no, I'm not a bad person. I'm not a mean person. I'm never going to do these things, but I have an aggressive tendency. I'm having an unpleasant emotion. Acknowledge it, put a pin in it, if you will, and then watch a horror movie or listen to a metal album. And if you bring it to a place of, maybe this isn't the healthiest thought in the world, but here's some art that can help me process it, that'll help me get rid of it.
Right.
Life's going to get better. I watch horror movies when I'm in a really bad mood. And by the end of it, I'm just having a great time because it helps me get out some of that less than pleasant aggression, but it also makes me laugh, and it also allows me to participate in the darker side of life or the more cruel side of life without actually having to engage in those activities. And it's the same reason George Costanza is so funny on Seinfeld. I mean, we've all wanted to explode into our boss's office, say, "You're a joke, no one takes you seriously, I quit."
Right.
We've all wanted to do that. Certain people have done that. And if you've seen that happen in real life, it's horrific. You don't want to see that. It's awkward for everybody. You don't know what's going to happen. But when there's that distance and you see it on TV, it's funny.
Yeah.
Same with the horror. Exact same thing with a horror movie.
Yeah. No, I 100%, man, 100%. It's interesting too, going back to the Devin Townsend thing or Russell Brand. Okay, so there's a lot in this. This might be probably my last question of the day. And I'm sorry if it's not necessarily musically loaded, but there's this idea of spiritual catharsis, right? And talking about what you were talking about a second ago is so true. This idea of, well, I am in a sense experiencing the violence of this horror movie, and therefore I'm experiencing a couple of different versions of catharsis. I'm actually ridding myself of my own negative energy, and I'm starting to revel in that. At the same token, I'm seeing the silliness, and I'm seeing my humanity spring out on the other side. But I also feel like with somebody like Devin Townsend, he's seeking. There's this combination of aggression and violence in his music. And at the time, of course, with Strapping Young Lad, he was also a drug addict, an alcoholic. He was really sick, actually. And so he was constantly trying to figure himself out through the violence of the music and trying to cleanse his soul, so to speak. He's, of all the artists I've ever heard in my life, he's the only artist I listen to who I think wants to be a Christian, but can't step out in public faith to that because it would take away his cool card. I'm telling you, I really think that's true of Devin. And then recently I saw that Russell Brand, who's in a sense lived this, over the top, ostentatious, wild, sexual, perverted, dangerous, drug-fueled frenzy of a life for the last 25 years. And then all of a sudden, he's publicly professing his faith in Jesus. I find that we're living in a world where people are, in a sense, going from one extreme to the other. So my question to you isn't so much about a question or asking you about, to talk about faith or, what you believe today or what you don't believe, but it is to say that, do you find that now as you're an adult, that you're fully formed, that you're now seeking the next part of your path?
I'm a very visual person. I tend to learn best when looking at something rather than reading something or just hearing something.
Right.
When I write music on guitar, I always see it on the neck first and then figure it out and write it down. And often when recording, I'm looking at tab just because it feels good to do that. So very visually based person. I don't ever think about such things in abstract terms. When I think of my future, I think of a big Victorian house that I want to paint blood red.
Right on.
I think of people walking by, looking at that house and going, "Oh yeah, that's where that guy lives." I think of more music. I see the albums in my head because a lot of these songs are already written. I'm just polishing them up, making sure they're exactly what I hope them to be.
Right.
I see more good times with my band and my friends, more good times with my wife. I don't know if that's actively seeking things out.
Sure.
But even if it is, those aren't necessarily the terms that I would call them. That to me, that's just, it's what feels right. It's what I see in my head. And I've always also been the person that's I'm very gut instinct. I don't think about things too critically, because if I do that to me is death, man. That is, I will sit and I will overthink and overthink and overthink until I have driven everyone around me completely crazy.
I understand that.
So if it gets up here, it's never going to leave, and that's not a good place to be. If I just think about these images that I want to see in my future, and I feel a sense in my gut, like, yes, this is right, this is the correct, I just go for it.
Right.
Any more thought than that is it's not a good place for my head to go.
Yeah. Man, Michael, I'm telling you, you are one seriously just mentally, spiritually, physically fit dude. You're just money. Your dad did it right. So, I mean, big kudos to Dad. I love who I'm talking to, man. I'm really fascinated by you because you just again, look, you could be putting it on, but I know you're not. I know you're not. I
don't have the ability to do that. I think everybody has to wear a mask to a certain degree, especially in the times we live in, which get real scary with all the social media stuff. But I'm very incapable of putting people on for too long. I mean, it's just too much work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to keep lying to keep that going. It's not worth it.
And then that eats away at whoever you are really on the inside. The more lies you put on top of that, the more that's just going to eat away at you. And that's, again, I have been that guy too, and I had to learn that that's an extreme defense mechanism, and that kills you in the end. So don't do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I have one question I want to ask that I started asking everybody, which is it's basically a statement. It's not so much a question. I've been thinking about this idea of things that we are versus things that we want to be, right? So especially in America, we're sort of taught to dream. We're taught to, sort of plan out our future and to say, someday I will be this. Someday I will go in this direction, right? We're always thinking in some days. We're not necessarily present. It's part of our greatest strength and part of our greatest weakness is we're not usually available right now because we're dreaming and working towards a future. But who is Michael right now? Like, can you give me a few statements about yourself? Like, I am invincible. I am a guitar god. You know what I mean? That idea. You might give me a few?
Okay. I am happy where I'm at, but I'm also excited for the future. I am a total guitar nerd and horror nerd. I am a very happily married man who has a lot of really great friends and a great family.
Yeah.
I am excited to practice guitar later today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you have children?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Hold out for a while, brother. Hold out. It's a game changer, but it's also a life, like, I mean, no duh, but it's a lot. Even if you're like really well put together, it's a lot.
I can imagine the hair immediately going back and going, oh no, this is a full-time job that lives in my house.
Yeah, for sure. It is. So, okay, so the work that you're putting out, we'll end with this. Give me a little bit of promo. I'm not going to put the words in your mouth. I'll let you tell everybody. Yeah, tell us what's going on with the band.
So most recently, on June 29th, which is my other guitar player's birthday, that's why we picked that date.
Nice.
We just put out our latest release. It's an EP called You and Your Friends Are Dead, Game Over, which is a reference to the 89 Friday the 13th game, the old arcade game.
Yeah.
That was not received very well at all. Purple Jason. And we are getting ready to release our next EP. And I suppose now is as good a time as any to tell everyone the name. Our next EP, it doesn't have a release date yet, but it is finished. We're just waiting on some promotional material. It's called The Mother of Death.
Nice.
It's going to be 4 songs plus a cool interlude. And I think, everyone always says stuff like this, but I think it's the best thing we've done yet. It's the songs are a great combination of really aggressive and brutal, but also very catchy. There's a lot of melody. There's a lot of really cool guitar playing. And I'm extremely excited for it. After that, we've got, like I said, we go to the studio and record everything at this point almost a year in advance, just so we can have it in the can.
Nice.
We've got another release after that. I don't want to give away too much yet because we still have to do vocals, frankly. But yeah, there's no slowing down. Put it that way. Absolutely no slowing down.
Man. The future's so dark for Necronomicon X Mortis. Dude, I'm so happy to have met you, and I really want nothing but the best for you. I think I
had a great time being here. I really did.
Good. Yeah, you're fascinating. You're super cool. You're super kind, and I feel like you'd be a great counselor for me. If I ever have a bad day, I'll just hit you up privately and be like, "Okay, dude, what would you do? Because this old man can't figure it out."
I'd send you a list of horror movies, and I'd say, go get yourself some root beer, a Hershey's with almonds, and some popcorn to make on your stove. That'll fix any bad day.
I'm going to go put Audition on right now and just watch her cut his ankle off.
Oh, God, no.
I love that movie so much.
That's a tough one. Oof.
Yeah. Now, see, that's funny because that one I can do. I don't know why. It's something about it's because it's not silly. It's full on, like, the worst kind of horror because you can imagine it happening to you.
Yes. To put it lightly, yes. Takeshi Miike is
brilliant.
Probably my favorite Japanese director. And that movie, I know he's done more offensive and gorier movies than Audition, but Audition, that gets you right in that sweet spot of just a situation you'd never want anyone to be in. Yeah.
For those who don't know, hang on to your hats if you go rent it. It is a movie that takes one of the most terrifying turns, and boy, oh boy, does it not let up until the end. It is a very mean movie. That is a mean movie.
And if you're at the video store, there's an old Lucio Fulci movie that I think everyone should see called The House by the Cemetery. I think it came out in, I want to say 81.
Yep. I've seen it.
It makes no sense whatsoever, but God, it's cool. It's got such style.
Mm-hmm.
So there's my recommendation for everybody. House by the Cemetery, Lucio Fulci.
Yeah. Oh, and I have one. I'm not trying to top you, but if you're going back to Takashi Miike, Ichi the Killer is
that's a good one.
That's a full-on That's visual, boy. I mean, and hilarious. Like, it's so gross, it's hilarious.
Yes.
So check it out. All right, man. Well, look, you're fantastic. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being my new friend. And I hope the band just really hits it in stride and you become an icon in that place, because there's so many bands in that thin vertical, the genre, but most of them aren't very well produced, and no offense to any of those bands, but they're just not really well put together. Yours is a real great treat and I love it. So my hat's off to you, brother. Yeah, man. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Absolutely, dude. Thank you again.
You've been listening to Sentimental Illness with Rob Leland. Our theme song, Machine, has been graciously provided by Harris Heller. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast media. You can directly support the show on Patreon as well, where you can find us at patreon.com/This Is Sentimental Illness. It also helps us a lot if you rate the show online, so jump out there and give us 5 stars. And lastly, always remember, your mind will overthink everything, but your heart can never love enough. See you soon.